If Bernie Sanders speaks to you, if Bernie Sanders is the majority of America's favorite politician, he is the most favorite politician in America. If Bernie Sanders has widespread union support, if Bernie Sanders has widespread support among millennials, if Bernie Sanders has widespread support among non-white voters, as the polls I just showed you, why wouldn't he immediately and automatically be the front runner for president of the United States? Well,
makes sense.
There's a little something called the oligarchy. There's a little something called a rigged political system. There's a little something called Tom Perez and the DNC. There's a little something called election fraud and voter suppression and rigging
and
super delegates. So I want to read you a piece from my one of my best friends in the world, BFF Donna Brazile, who, if you remember, in the 2016 election, I broke the story, well, courtesy of WikiLeaks, but I had to go through all the emails. She was flipping questions to Hillary Clinton's campaign first, and Donna Brazile, when she was trying to sell her book, actually told the truth. But like Kamala Harris, this truth only lasted for 24 hours. And then she started moonwalking away. So I'm going to read you a little piece from Donna. If you've already read it, just work with me. Because I want to remind you that, and I'm sure Bernie Sanders knows this, he ain't just up against Kamala Harris or Cory Booker or Kirsten Gillibrand or Julian Castro or Elizabeth Warren or Tulsi Gabbard. Donna Brazile, in her words, "Before I called Bernie Sanders, I lit a candle in my living room and I put on some gospel music. I wanted to center myself for what I knew would be an emotional phone call. I had promised Bernie when I took the helm of the Democratic National Committee after the convention that I would get to the bottom of whether Hillary Clinton's team had rigged the nomination process, as a cache of emails stolen by Russian hackers and posted online had suggested. I had my suspicions from the moment I walked into the DNC the door of the DNC a month or so earlier, based on the leaked emails. But who knew if some of them might have been forged? I needed to have solid."
Blood said she needs more me and you on cameras, more appealing and compelling.
How many times have I told you to move to New York? Huh?
I'm on my way.
I needed to have solid proof, and so did Bernie. See, the problem with that is I live in an apartment, and Ty doesn't realize that his voice is really, really, really loud. So if you want to fund us for soundproofing, how much is soundproofing this apartment? Because I don't want to get kicked out of my apartment. But Ty's going to be on camera more. So Donna Brazile says, "I followed the money. My predecessor, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, had not been the most active chair in fundraising at a time when President Barack Obama's neglect had left the party in significant debt. As Hillary's campaign gained momentum, she resolved the party's debt and put it on a starvation diet. It had become dependent on her campaign for survival, which she expected to wield control of its operations." That was a little something called money laundering with the Hillary Victory Fund. Yeah, illegal, but in America, if you're Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, or any powerful person, really, you're fine. Debbie was not a good manager. She hadn't been very interested in controlling the party. She let Clinton headquarters in Brooklyn do as it desired, so she didn't have to inform the party officers how bad the situation was. How much control Brooklyn had and for how long was still something I had been trying to uncover for the last few weeks. By September 7th, the day I called Bernie, I had found my proof, and it broke my heart. Oh, Donna. The Saturday morning after the convention in July, I called Gary Gensler, the chief financial officer of Hillary's campaign. He wasted no words. He told me the Democratic Party was broke and $2 million in debt. "What?" I screamed. "I'm an officer of the party, and they've been telling me everything is fine, and they were raising money with no problems." "This wasn't true," he said. Officials from Hillary campaign had taken a look at the DNC's books. Obama left the party $24 million in debt, $15 million in bank debt, and more than $8 million owed to vendors after the 2012 campaign, and had been paying it off very slowly. Obama's campaign was not scheduled to pay it off until 2016. Hillary for America, the campaign, and Hillary Victory Fund, its joint fundraising vehicle with the DNC, a money laundering scheme, had taken care of 80% of the remaining debt in 2016, about $10 million, and had placed the party on an allowance. So you literally had a candidate running the DNC. Hillary Clinton, a candidate running the DNC, not during the general election, during the primary. This on top of WikiLeaks emails that showed the DNC was preparing to support Hillary Clinton's general election campaign before Bernie Sanders even announced. They already had their strategy in place to coronate Queen Hillary. If I didn't know about this, I assumed that none of the other officers knew about it either. That was just Debbie's way. In my experience, she didn't come to the officers of the DNC for advice and counsel. She seemed to make decisions on her own and let us know at the last minute what she had decided, and she had done as she had done when she told us about the hacking only minutes before the Washington Post broke the news. On the phone, Gary told me the DNC needed a $2 million loan, which the campaign had arranged. No, that can't be true, I said. The party cannot take out a loan without the unanimous agreement of all the officers. Gary, how did they do this without me knowing? I don't know how Debbie relates to the officers, Gary said. He described the party as fully under control of the Hillary campaign, which seemed to confirm the suspicions of the Bernie camp. The campaign had the DNC on life support, giving it money every month to meet its basic expenses, while the campaign was using the party as a fundraising clearinghouse. Under FEC law, an individual can contribute a maximum of $2,700 directly to a presidential campaign, but the limits are much higher for contributions to state parties and a party's national committee. So that's what they were doing. Donors to Hillary Clinton's campaigns, big wig, Democratic donors, use a lot of tax shelters in the Cayman Islands, lobby Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton for tax cuts and subsidies and all sorts of goodies, while derailing about we need a campaign finance reform, while they abuse the system. They were not only donating $2,700 to the Hillary Clinton campaign, they were then donating the max to the DNC, they were donating the max to the state parties, and this money was supposed to go to the state parties, was supposed to go to the DNC, but then was getting funneled back into Hillary Clinton's campaign. That's called money laundering, but not illegal if you're Hillary Clinton or powerful people. Individuals who had maxed out at their $2,700 contribution limit to the campaign could write an additional check for $353,400 to the Hillary Victory Fund. That figure represented $10,000 to each of the 32 state parties who were part of the Victory Fund agreement, $320,000 and $33,400 to the DNC. The money would be deposited in the states first and transferred to the DNC shortly after that. Money in the battleground states usually stayed in the state, but all other states funneled that money directly to the DNC, which quickly transferred the money to Brooklyn. Gee, what do you mean the campaign was rigged against Bernie Sanders? Wait, I said. That victory fund was supposed to be for whoever was the nominee in the state party races. You're telling me that Hillary has been controlling it since before she got the nomination? Gary said the campaign had to do it or the party would collapse. That was the deal Robbie struck with Debbie. Robbie Mook, Hillary's campaign manager. It was to sustain the DNC. I'm sure it was to sustain the DNC while Hillary's campaign was taking the money meant for the DNC into its campaign coffers. We sent the party nearly $20 million from September until the convention and more to prepare for the election. What's the burn rate? Gary asked. How much money do we need every month to fund the party? The burn rate was $3.5 million to $4 million a month. I gasped. I had a pretty good sense of the DNC's operation after having served as interim chair 5 years earlier. Back then, the monthly expenses were half of that. What had happened? The party chair usually shrinks the staff between presidential election campaigns, but Debbie had chosen not to do that. She had stuck lots of consultants on the DNC payroll, and Obama's consultants were being financed by the DNC too. When we hung up, I was livid. Not at Gary, but at the mess I had inherited. I knew that Debbie had outsourced a lot of the management of the party and had not been the greatest at fundraising. I would not be that kind of chair, even if I was only interim chair. Did they think I would just be a surrogate for them, get on the road and rouse up the crowds? I was going to manage this party the best I could and try to make it better, even if Brooklyn didn't like it. It would be weeks before I fully understand the financial shenanigans. They were keeping the party on life support. Right around the time of the convention, the leaked emails revealed Hillary's campaign was grabbing money from the state parties for its own purposes, leaving the states with very little to support down-ballot races. As Politico reported on May 2nd, 2016, described the big fundraising vehicle she had launched through the states the summer before, quoting a vow she had made to rebuild the parties from the ground up. When our state parties are strong, we win. We win. That's how it happens. Yet the states kept less than half of 1% of the $82 million they had amassed from the extravagant fundraisers Hillary Clinton was holding, just as Gary had described to me when he and I talked in August. I'm gonna go a little forward to get off the money part of this. So she told Bernie about the fundraising agreement. Bernie took this stoically. He did not yell or express outrage. He asked me what I thought Hillary's chances were. The polls were unanimous in her winning, but what he wanted to know was my own assessment. I had to be frank with him. I did not trust the polls, I said. I told him I had visited states around the country, and I had found a lack of enthusiasm for her everywhere. I was concerned about the Obama coalition and about millennials. I urged Bernie to work as hard as he can to bring his supporters into the fold with Hillary and to campaign with all the heart and hope he could muster. He might find some of her positions too centrist, her coziness with the financial elites distasteful, but he knew, and I knew, that the alternative was a person who would put the very future of the country in peril. I knew he heard me, I knew he agreed with me, but I never in my life had felt so tiny and powerless. When I hung up the call to Bernie, I started to cry. Not of guilt, but out of anger. We should go forward. We had to. So that was Donna Brazile, former DNC chair, who basically did her own part in rigging the campaign against Bernie Sanders. And I'm not telling you all of this to relive the 2016 campaign, but I believe it's important so we know where we came from to know what we're getting into in 2020. So here's the thing. Donna Brazile conveniently left out of that little mea culpa, which, by the way, 24 hours after she published that, she started moonwalking away. Oh, I didn't say the primary was rigged. No, not rigged. Just one candidate controlling the neutral state party. Not rigged at all. So what's interesting, she left out, the DNC planting hit jobs on Bernie Sanders with NBC, CNN, MS, all of these channels, the New York Times. The Bernie Bros myth came from the DNC. Trying to paint Bernie Sanders as an atheist before the West Virginia primary, that came from the DNC. Setting the primary debates at only 6 debates came from Debbie Wasserman Schultz because she didn't want Hillary Clinton to have that much exposure. Because she knew the more Bernie Sanders had exposure, the more he would attract a larger voting base. So we are supposed to believe that, oh, well, now, the superdelegates have been weakened. If you think because superdelegates can now vote on the second ballot, if you think that because Tom Perez is the DNC chair, if you think that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are just going to sit off on the side and clap for all the participants, you got another thing coming. Remember, the Democratic Party was not expecting Bernie Sanders to explode. The Democratic Party did not have a lot of time to prepare for Bernie Sanders. The Democratic Party was kind of making up the rigging as they went along when it comes to Bernie Sanders. They've had 2.5 years now to prepare for Bernie 2.0. And you better believe they're prepared, because I firmly believe the Democratic Party, that would be Nancy Pelosi, that would be Chuck Schumer, that would be all of the donors, that would be Goldman Sachs, that would be JP Morgan, that would mean ExxonMobil, that would mean Pfizer, that would mean the big pharmaceutical companies, that would mean the big real estate developers, that would mean Silicon Valley. They would 100% prefer a re-elected Donald Trump to a President Bernie Sanders.